a 20-year-old farm boy from Wisconsin, stepped off a train in Chicago, carrying little more than ambition. That young man would become the most revolutionary architect America ever produced. But first, he would have to survive scandal, tragedy, and the complete destruction of everything he held dear. Frank Lloyd Wright arrived in Chicago at the perfect moment. The city was rebuilding itself after the Great Fire, and architectural innovation was exploding. Wright found his way to the office of Louis Sullivan, known as the father of skyscrapers and one of the greatest architects in American history. Under Sullivan's mentorship, Wright absorbed a crucial philosophy: form follows function. But Wright's genius lay in taking the idea further. While Sullivan designed upward-reaching buildings that dominated their surroundings, Wright began to envision something entirely different: architecture that would grow organically from the landscape itself. Working nights and weekends, Wright started designing what would become known as prairie-style houses. These low, horizontal structures seemed to merge with the earth, with broad overhanging eaves and bands of windows that brought the outside in. He wasn't just designing buildings. He was creating a uniquely American architecture that rejected European traditions in favor of something that belonged to this land. Wright's ambition could not be contained within Sullivan's shadow. In 1893, he struck out on his own, and within a decade, he was revolutionizing residential architecture across Chicago's suburbs. Success, however, came with complications. In 1909, at the height of his career, Wright made a decision that scandalized society and nearly destroyed his reputation. He abandoned his wife, Catherine, and their 6 children to run away with Martha Borthwick Cheney, who went by Mama. The affair became front-page news, and the social pressure became so intense that Wright and Mama fled to Europe. For 2 years, they lived in self-imposed exile, traveling through Germany and Italy, while Wright tried to salvage his career and reputation. When they finally returned to America, Wright was determined to rebuild his life on his own terms. He returned to his family's land in Wisconsin to build Taliesin, a name meaning shining brow in Welsh. This wasn't just a house. It was Wright's attempt to create a perfect harmony between human habitation and the natural world. Built into a hillside using local limestone, Taliesin seemed to grow from the earth itself. For a few years, Wright and Mama lived quietly at Taliesin, working and creating together. Then came August 15, 1914, a date that would forever change Wright's life. While Wright was away in Chicago, a deranged servant set fire to Taliesin's living quarters. Mama and 6 others, including her 2 children, were brutally murdered as they tried to escape the flames. In a single afternoon, Wright lost the woman he loved, his home, and nearly his will to continue. But Wright's response revealed the steel in his character. "I will rebuild," he declared. And he did. When fire struck again in 1925, destroying much of Taliesin once more, Wright rebuilt again. Each time he made it better, stronger, and more beautiful. This resilience, this refusal to be broken by catastrophe, became the crucible that forged Wright's greatest work. In 1935, Pittsburgh department store magnate Edgar Kaufman approached Wright with a commission that would create architectural history. Kaufman wanted a weekend retreat for his family at a site in Pennsylvania featuring a beautiful waterfall. Wright visited the property, studied the landscape, discussed the project with Kaufman, and then nothing. For months, no drawings appeared. Kaufman grew impatient. The story goes that one day Kaufman called unexpectedly, saying he was driving over to see the plans. Wright had nothing to show him. In what has become one of architecture's great legends, Wright sat down at his drafting table and, in a burst of creative energy that lasted just a few hours, produced the complete drawings for what would become Falling Water. He finished just as Kaufman's car pulled into the driveway. The result was breathtaking. Rather than building near the waterfall, Wright built over it. The house appears to float above the cascading water. Every room frames a different view of the forest and stream. It was organic architecture perfected. Falling water made Wright internationally famous and proved that his vision of organic architecture could create spaces of unprecedented beauty and innovation. But Wright wasn't finished. At age 70, when most architects would be considering retirement, he began his most ambitious project yet, Taliesin West in the Arizona desert. Using local stone and redwood with canvas panels that filtered the desert light, Wright created not just another home and studio, but a school. He understood that his revolutionary ideas needed to survive beyond his own lifetime. At Taliesin West, Wright gathered young architects from around the world, teaching them not just how to design buildings, but how to see the relationship between human needs and natural forms. The longer I live, Wright would tell his students, the more beautiful life becomes. If you foolishly ignore beauty, you will soon find yourself without it. This wasn't just about architecture anymore. Wright was passing on a philosophy of life itself, the idea that we have a responsibility to create beauty, to work in harmony with nature, and to leave the world more beautiful than when we found it. Meanwhile, Wright was working on what would become his final masterpiece. In 1943, Solomon Guggenheim commissioned him to design a museum in New York City. What Wright created challenged every assumption about how art should be displayed. Instead of traditional rectangular galleries, Wright designed a continuous spiral ramp that wound from ground level to a glass dome 92 feet above. Visitors would take an elevator to the top and slowly descend. The building itself became a work of art, a smooth white spiral that stood in dramatic contrast to Manhattan's rigid grid. Frank Lloyd Wright passed away in 1959, just months before the Guggenheim opened. But he had lived to see his vision realized, a building that transformed not just how we display art, but how we think about the very nature of interior space. Frank Lloyd Wright designed over 1,000 structures in his 7-decade career, but his true legacy lies in something far more profound. He showed us that great achievement requires not just talent, but the courage to persist through devastating failure. He proved that innovation comes not from following established rules, but from listening deeply to the world around us and finding new ways to respond to what we discover. Most importantly, Wright understood that great work is never just about personal success. It's about creating something beautiful that will outlast us and passing on the knowledge and inspiration that will allow others to create beauty long after we're gone. In our age of rapid change and environmental crisis, Wright's vision of organic architecture, of learning to live in harmony with the natural world rather than trying to dominate it, feels not just relevant, but essential. The farm boy from Wisconsin, who arrived in Chicago with nothing but ambition, became America's greatest architect by learning one crucial lesson. The most profound beauty emerges when we stop trying to impose our will on the world and start listening to what the world is trying to teach us. That lesson remains as revolutionary today as it was more than a century ago.